The island had many names over the years, but none spoken out loud after dark. Locals called it Deadwater Point, though most maps labeled it a police jurisdiction number instead of a place. No one lived there permanently, not anymore. The last families abandoned it decades ago, convinced something in the forests and abandoned structures did not want company, and yet the government kept the small police station running. Not because they needed it, but because shutting it down meant admitting something hunted the officers who worked there. 22 officers had died on the island in a single year. None of the deaths made sense. None left a suspect. Some vanished entirely. Others were found with expressions of pure terror, their bodies untouched, no wounds, no struggle, as if fear alone had killed them. Yet the department kept sending new officers, one at a time, each more desperate for work than the last. And the one now in question was a man named Ethan Marrow, age 38, 5 years on the force, assigned to Deadwater Point for temporary rotation, a rotation he would never return from. The hook to his death began on a night when the wind carried a low, unnatural hum across the shoreline, a sound that made even the sea stay still. Ethan had radioed the mainland at 1:47 a.m., his voice tight, whispering that he heard footsteps outside the station, though he was the only man assigned there. He said the footsteps weren't human. They didn't fall with the rhythm of a person walking. Instead, they dragged, paused, reversed direction, came close to the walls, and scraped across the outer siding like claws made of stone. Dispatch asked him to check the perimeter. He refused. That alone was strange. Officers didn't refuse perimeter checks. But Ethan repeated something he'd said twice before. Whatever's out there isn't supposed to exist. 30 minutes later, the radio went dead. Just silence. No static, no signal. By sunrise, the backup boat sent to the island found Ethan's flashlight still on, lying near the station door. But Ethan himself was not there. Only one thing remained behind, a trail of wet footprints leading away from the door into the forest. Bare footprints, large, human-shaped, but each one slightly different from the last, as if the shape of the foot kept changing while walking. This was the start of the mystery no one wanted to discuss, and the reason new officers avoided Deadwater Point like a plague. That morning, after Ethan's disappearance, the mainland police chief, Officer Grant Keller, reviewed the body cam footage recovered from a storage locker inside the island station. Some frames were corrupted beyond recognition, twisted streaks of white and black, like the camera had been submerged underwater. But the surviving frames chilled him. Ethan was filmed pacing, whispering to himself, staring at the door with wide eyes. At one point, he turned toward the camera and said something that wasn't part of any official report, something raw and terrified. There's something wrong with the island. Something watching me. Not animal, not human. Something else. He leaned closer, sweat dripping down his temple. It's learning how to walk. Grant stopped the footage there. He didn't want to see more. But he forced himself, because he had to know what happened next. The footage after that was mostly static, but through the warping pixels and audio distortion, he could faintly hear a rhythmic sound. Drag. Tap, drag. Tap. Slow, patient, like something with too many limbs trying to mimic footsteps. Reports from the island always shared similar patterns. Officers described hearing whispers outside the station walls. They described seeing figures in the trees, never fully formed, always shifting, always wrong. They described movement in the dark that stopped the moment a flashlight touched it. A few officers reported feeling watched even inside locked rooms. One officer claimed he woke up to the sound of someone breathing directly above him, despite the bunk having no upper bed. Another officer said he saw someone standing in the hallway wearing his uniform, but when he blinked, the figure vanished. None of those officers survived longer than 6 months. Some lasted a week. One lasted 2 days. Deadwater Point had a curse, some said. Others believed it was a predator. Others believed the island itself was alive. But no one, not even the mainland authorities, understood why only police officers died there, and why the island needed to be policed if no civilians lived on it. Ethan's case became different when a fisherman named Noah Clark, who lived on a nearby island, claimed he saw something the night Ethan vanished. He reported seeing a man walking along the shoreline with no shadow. Noah said the figure changed shape in the moonlight, sometimes tall, sometimes small, sometimes crawling instead of walking. According to him, the figure paused at the edge of the forest and turned toward the sea. Noah used binoculars. He said the figure's head didn't look like a head. It bent sideways, then backward, then forward again, like it was searching for the right position. It wasn't him, Noah told the investigators. No human moves like that. No human bends like that. Whatever took that officer, it wasn't human, and it wasn't trying to hide. Noah reported that the figure eventually walked into the forest without making a sound, disappearing between the trees as if swallowed by them. Officer Grant, desperate for answers, spent days reviewing older cases tied to Deadwater Point. He noticed details others ignored. Every officer assigned there reported strange auditory distortions before death. Footsteps that didn't match the terrain, knocking that echoed from metal structures nowhere near them, voices calling their names from opposite directions at the same time, and all of them at some point reported seeing a figure outside. Not the same description, but always something off. Grant believed Ethan had finally gotten close to whatever hunted officers on the island. Too close. And whatever it was, didn't let him leave. The investigation grew colder when no body was found. No blood. Nothing. Just those shifting footprints and the damaged interior of the station, claw marks on the walls, handprints on the door, and a radio with melted wiring, as if someone or something held it too tight. The question no one dared ask out loud was the simplest. What killed Ethan Marrow? The official report listed missing. The unofficial tone in the entire department whispered dead. But the truth was neither. Because by the 6th day, Ethan wasn't dead. He wasn't alive either. And on that 6th day, someone claimed they saw him again, deep in the forest of Deadwater Point, walking slowly toward the abandoned watchtower, wearing a uniform that didn't belong to him anymore. The search team that arrived 6 days after Ethan's disappearance was small, only 4 officers. Not because the department lacked manpower, but because no one volunteered to go. The mainland officers whispered excuses, swapped shifts, traded assignments, anything to avoid being chosen. The chief had to pull rank just to assemble a team, and none of the 4 men stepped onto the boat without the look of someone walking into a graveyard. They carried rifles, thermal cameras, body cams, a drone, and satellite radios, every device meant to eliminate uncertainty. But equipment only helps when the threat follows rules. Deadwater Point never did. The moment the boat reached the island, the air seemed wrong. Too still, too heavy. The trees didn't move, even though the waves crashed loudly against the rocks. No wind. yet the leaves trembled like something breathed between them. The officers stepped onto the sand, looked at each other, and without speaking knew the same truth. The island was watching. Their first stop was the police station. The door was half open, but not broken, almost as if someone inside had opened it gently, then left in a hurry. The interior smelled of damp wood and metal, the scent of a place abandoned too long. Officer Brooks kneeled beside the strange footprints Ethan left behind. They weren't normal. Each print slightly changed shape. One footprint had long toes, another had none, one had an arch, the next was flat. As Brooks knelt closer, his breath caught. Embedded within one of the deeper prints was something thin, white, and sharp, like a bone sliver. He picked it up with tweezers. It wasn't bone. It bent slightly, flexing like a fingernail, but white as chalk. Brooks swallowed hard, pocketed the fragment, and whispered, "Whatever this is, it's shedding." Inside the station, the air felt colder than the outside. Officer Ramirez checked the body cam archive. Ethan's final recorded moments were corrupted, but the audio, once cleaned, contained a disturbing pattern beneath Ethan's words. A second voice, whispering in short bursts, not speaking English, not any known language. The whisper matched the timing of Ethan's breaths, almost as if mimicking him. The more they listened, the clearer the whisper formed into something shaped like words, repeating the same sound. "Owen. Owen." The officers exchanged looks. None of them knew anyone named Owen. But the whisper repeated the name with a slow, dragging hiss, as if calling for someone. Ramirez muted the audio. "It's not saying a name," he said softly. "It's practicing." Outside, Officer Reed launched the drone toward the forest. He flew it low, following the trail of shifting footprints. The forest canopy swallowed the drone in seconds, branches bending in ways that didn't match the windless air. The drone camera picked up flashes of movement, something tall, dark, bending between trees. Something that moved too smoothly, its form changing with each step. Reed tried zooming in, but the lens blurred the moment the figure turned toward the camera, as if the drone itself refused to focus. The video glitched, pixelated, then cleared just long enough to reveal what looked like a human silhouette, but with an arm too long, dragging along the ground like a rope of muscle. Reed's voice cracked. "What the hell is that?" And then the drone signal died. Complete blackout, no static, just gone. Officer Grant, who stayed behind on the mainland, monitored their satellite radios. At 3:12 p.m., he received the first confused transmission. It was Brooks. "We heard screaming," he said breathlessly. "Coming from inside the forest. We think it's Ethan." But Grant knew better. The voice didn't sound like Brooks believed it. The scream had repeated every 30 seconds. Human screams don't do that. Humans run out of breath or pain breaks the rhythm. But this scream looped like a recorded file, just slightly wrong each time, as if something was trying to sound human but didn't know how to finish the emotion. Grant warned them, "Do not go toward the sound. Stay together. Don't separate." That's an order. But orders didn't matter on Deadwater Point, because the forest suddenly screamed again, from behind them this time. Reed spun around, flashlight shaking. Trees stood still, nothing between them. No movement. But the scream came again, this time from their left, then from their right. Then high above, like something was crawling upside down through the branches. The forest didn't echo sound normally. Whatever lived there threw its voice everywhere at once, bending direction, bending distance. The officers raised their rifles. No target, no shape, just that inhuman mimic of Ethan's voice, begging, trembling, whispering their names now. Brooks, Ramirez. The voice cracked, then giggled. A wet, broken sound. Reed stumbled backward. "Ethan's dead," he whispered. "Whatever that thing is, it's using him." The moment Reed spoke, the forest fell silent. Too silent. A suffocating quiet that pushed against their ears. Ramirez checked his rifle again, hands trembling. "We should go back to the boat," he whispered. Brooks nodded, right before a branch snapped somewhere deeper in the trees. A single crack, sharp, heavy, like something large had stepped on it. The officers froze. Another step. Then another, slow, heavy, deliberate, drag. Tap, drag, tap. The same rhythm Ethan reported the night he went missing. The sound moved closer. The officers aimed in its direction. Their flashlights flickered, then stabilized. Something shifted between the trees, tall as a man but not shaped like one, its edges blending with the darkness as if its body had no fixed outline. It paused, leaning forward slightly, almost studying them. Reed panicked and fired. The bullet hit a tree. The shape didn't flinch. Instead, it slowly straightened its posture, its movement eerie, like gravity didn't fully apply. And then, it stepped into a patch of light. All four officers gasped, because the face staring back at them was Ethan Marrow's, but wrong. So wrong. The skin was stretched too tight, the jaw hung lower than it should, the eyes didn't blink, and the neck bent slightly to the side like someone had tried copying the shape of a human and failed. The thing wearing Ethan's face tilted its head further, almost curious, then opened its mouth far wider than a human jaw should allow. No sound came out. Just cold breath. The island seemed to inhale through him, holding its breath before deciding who to kill first. The creature stood there for nearly 10 seconds, silent, unblinking, the windless forest pressing down around it. Its eyes, though shaped like Ethan's, didn't move like a man's. They drifted apart slightly, then realigned, as if the face was trying to remember what a human looked like. Officer Brooks whispered, "That's not him," but his voice barely left his throat. The creature twitched once, its head jerking at a sharp angle, like a marionette whose strings were yanked too hard. Then, without warning, it took a step forward. The ground didn't crunch beneath its feet. The sound it made was softer, like skin dragging over glass. The air changed. It carried a faint metallic taste, blood mixed with salt. The officers opened fire. The gunshots shattered the quiet, echoing across the island. Every round hit something. They could see the flashes tearing through the figure's outline. But no blood spilled. No recoil, no cry. The thing staggered backward, not from impact, but as if acting out the reaction it thought it should have. Then slowly, deliberately, it smiled. Not like Ethan ever smiled. The mouth stretched unnaturally wide, cheeks splitting slightly near the corners. Ramirez froze mid-reload. "It's copying us," he whispered. The creature blinked in slow motion, every movement delayed by seconds. Then, without warning, it bent backward, spine cracking, limbs snapping into impossible angles, and disappeared into the trees. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't. Only the smell of salt and rust remained. Reed screamed, "Run!" And they did. Through branches, mud, and wet leaves, breath burning in their lungs. Behind them the forest groaned. Not wind, not thunder, something else. A sound deep within the earth, pulsing like the island itself was alive. Brooks tripped and fell, flashlight spinning into the dark. As he reached for it, the beam landed on something half buried in the dirt. A boot. Ethan's boot. The leather was stiff. The sole soaked in something black that didn't reflect light. Brooks touched it, and his hand came away cold, as if dipped in ice water. Then, from somewhere very close, he heard breathing. Not behind him. Below him. Slow, wet, human breathing from the ground itself. He froze. Then the soil shifted beneath his hand, and a single pale finger pushed upward through the dirt, curling toward his wrist. Brooks screamed. Reed and Ramirez grabbed him, yanking him to his feet. They didn't look back. None of them did. They burst out of the tree line near the station, hearts pounding, lungs tearing. The sky had turned gray, too dark for early afternoon. Clouds rolled fast overhead, swirling in slow spirals that seemed centered over the island itself. "Where's Miller?" Ramirez gasped. They turned, at one man short. Officer Miller, the quiet one, the one who rarely spoke, was gone. He'd been right behind them. "Miller!" Brooks yelled. No answer. Only that same distant scream again, the one mimicking Ethan's voice. The same loop. The same wrongness. Then it shifted. The voice started crying this time, saying, "Help me!" over and over, but in Miller's tone. "Help me, Brooks. It's pulling me down." Inside the station, the temperature dropped suddenly, frosting the edges of the windows. The radio on the desk, still disconnected, flickered to life. Static. Then Miller's voice came through, faint, wet, gasping. "Don't look at it," he whispered. "If you look too long, it remembers your face." His breath caught, as though something was pressing on his chest. "It's not one thing," he said. "It's the island!" "It's all of it." Then a thud, and silence. The radio hissed once more and died. Brooks backed away from it, his face pale. Ramirez held his head in his hands, whispering prayers he hadn't said since childhood. Reed checked his rifle again, hands shaking too much to hold it steady. Outside, the sea started to rise. Waves slammed the rocks, higher each time, the waterline climbing unnaturally fast. The officers stared out the window and saw something impossible. The shoreline pulling inward, like the tide was being sucked rather than pushed. A black shape formed under the surface, not a shadow, but something living. It moved with slow, circular rhythm, enormous coiling beneath the waves. The air pressure dropped. Brooks clutched his ears as the floor vibrated. From the tree line came a new sound, hundreds of dragging footsteps. Too many, too fast. As if everything buried on that island had decided to wake up at once. Then came the voices, dozens, maybe hundreds, all calling their names. All in the wrong tones, all at once. "Brooks! Reed! Ramirez!" The voices overlapped, echoing through the radio, through the walls, through the sea itself. Some were crying, some laughing, some whispering prayers. One voice, deep and calm, whispered something new. "You shouldn't have come." The officers turned to run for the boat, only to find the dock already gone. The sea had swallowed it. Their only escape had been erased. Ramirez dropped to his knees, mumbling that they were already dead, that maybe they had been since the moment they stepped onto the island. Reed grabbed his collar, yelling at him to stand, but stopped when he saw the reflection in the station window. 3 figures stood behind them, silent, still, wearing police uniforms. Their faces, empty white where the features should be. The reflection blinked. The men in the room did not. Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Not the kind of dark you see when the power goes out. This was thicker, like the air itself had turned to ink, The sound of the sea vanished. Even their breathing seemed muted. Brooks clicked his flashlight. Nothing. He hit it again and again, the switch snapping in his trembling hand. No light. Ramirez tried the radio, but static came out like whispering voices, hundreds of them, each syllable sounding like a wet exhale. Reed found his backup torch, flicked it on, and for one fleeting second the beam caught movement in the corner. 3 silhouettes, standing too still, faces turned toward him. One looked like Ethan, one like Miller. The third wore Brooks's uniform, but Brooks was standing right there. He screamed, dropping the torch. The beam rolled across the floor, catching something pale, a bare foot. Another step followed it. Drag, tap, drag, tap. The sound grew louder. The floor creaked beneath invisible weight. Ramirez stumbled backward, whispering, "It's copying us again." He pointed at the wall where handprints, wet and red, appeared one by one, climbing upward, forming a path to the ceiling. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding slightly with each drag of that terrible rhythm. Reed picked up his rifle, shaking so badly the barrel clicked against the frame. "We're not trapped," he muttered, though the lie was obvious. "We can make it to the cliffs. Signal the boat. Someone will come." No one believed him, but in horror, logic doesn't matter. Only motion does. So they ran. Outside, the air was colder. The forest pulsed faintly with light, soft flashes like underwater lightning. Shadows moved between the trees, not away from the officers, but toward them, melting in and out of form, sometimes human, sometimes not. Brooks looked down at his hand. It was shaking violently, uncontrollably, like something under his skin was trying to crawl out. "It's touching me," he said, voice breaking. "It's under my skin." Reed grabbed his arm, and for a split second saw something shifting beneath it. A shape pressing outward, like a second hand pushing from inside. He jerked away, bile rising in his throat. "We keep moving," he said. "We keep moving or we die here." They reached the cliffs as the moon broke through the clouds. The sea below churned black and silver, waves crashing against rocks like something alive. There was no boat. No sign of rescue. The radio hissed again, static forming brief bursts of words. "Grant! Come back! Stop!" It was the mainland signal, barely audible. "If you hear this, don't—" The transmission cut. A shriek followed, not human. It echoed across the island, carrying so deep that even the cliffs trembled. Ramirez dropped to his knees again, clutching his ears. "That's it," he said. "That's what they hear before they die." From the tree line behind them came a glow. Not bright, not fire, but soft, white and pulsing, like a heart beating in the dark. Then the figures stepped out. At first 3, then 5, then more. Each one wore a uniform, soaked, torn, distorted. Their faces were stretched masks of pale skin, eyes black and empty. They moved slowly, in rhythm with the sea's pulse. Each step sounded like a heartbeat. Brooks whispered, "Those are the others." "The ones who died here?" One figure lifted its head. Ethan's face again, melted and wrong, jaw swaying loose. "Help me," it said, the same voice from the recordings. But the words didn't sound like a plea anymore. They sounded like bait. Reed fired again. The bullet passed through Ethan's chest, and the figure didn't react. Instead, its body shivered, the flesh rippling like water, and from its back sprouted something black, thin, and spider-like. The tendrils hit the ground, digging in, pulling it forward. Reed fired again, screamed, reloaded, but the thing kept coming, bending and twisting closer, the mouth widening until it split into two. Brooks turned to run, but the ground beneath him cracked open. The soil wasn't soil anymore. It pulsed, breathing in slow waves, soft as muscle. Brooks sank knee-deep before Reed could grab him. "Pull me out!" he screamed. Ramirez tried, but something in the ground pulled harder. A hand, pale, wet, and wrong, wrapped around Brooks's ankle from below. He looked down, and the face staring back up at him was his own. Then he was gone. Reed and Ramirez fell backward, screaming. The ground sealed like it had never opened. Just soil again, no trace. Ramirez stared at the spot, tears streaking his dirt-smeared face. "It's feeding on us," he said. "It's using us to become more like us." Reed didn't answer. He couldn't, because behind Ramirez, one of the figures had stepped closer, so close its shadow stretched over both of them. Reed aimed, but it was too late. The figure leaned down and whispered something directly into Ramirez's ear. He froze, his eyes widened, pupils shrinking to dots. "What did it say?" Reed shouted. Ramirez didn't blink. "It said, 'My name.'" He turned slowly, gun still raised, but his hand no longer shook. His face had gone calm, eerily calm. He smiled, not like himself. Reed backed away, heart pounding. "Ramirez?" he whispered. But Ramirez didn't move like Ramirez anymore. He took one step forward, slow and steady, and in that same dragging rhythm said, "We're all part of it now." Behind them, the sea exhaled, and from the cliffs below, something enormous began to rise. The sea below the cliffs churned in slow, spiraling circles, too controlled to be natural. Reed stumbled backward as the water bulged upward, heaving like something massive was forcing its way toward the surface. The sound was low at first, a deep vibration that rattled his teeth, then grew into a hollow moan that echoed across the island. Ramirez, if it was still Ramirez, turned toward the rising shape with eerie calm. Reed grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away, but Ramirez's body didn't budge. His limbs were stiff, locked in place like a puppet waiting for a command. "Ramirez, listen to me," Reed shouted. "Snap out of it!" But Ramirez didn't even blink, only whispered, "It's waking." A massive shadow broke through the water, long, dark, stretching far beneath the surface. Not a creature with a defined shape, but something amorphous, shifting, almost fluid. Its surface glistened like black oil pulsing in slow waves. Within the mass, Reed saw the shapes of human faces, dozens of them, pressing outward, distorted and silent, as if drowning inside something alive. Eyes rolled under the surface, mouths opened in soundless screams, hands pressed up only to be swallowed again. The thing didn't rise fully. It just hovered beneath the water with an intelligence that made Reed's gut twist. It wasn't coming out. It was listening. Then came the whisper. Not from the creature. Not from the trees. From the air itself. A vibration inside Reed's skull that felt like someone had pressed their mouth to his ear from the inside. "Reed," it breathed. Reed staggered, clutching his head, but the voice grew louder, overlapping itself, repeating his name in dozens of tones, some that sounded like dead officers, some like strangers, some like him. He dropped his rifle. "Stop," he gasped. "Stop saying my name." But the whisper didn't stop. It sharpened, becoming clearer. "Come closer." Ramirez stepped toward the cliff. Reed grabbed him but felt the sudden resistance. Ramirez's strength was not human anymore. His joints moved stiffly, like something inside was controlling each muscle. His neck jerked as he turned to look at Reed. "It wants us united," he said. "It wants us together." Then, without warning, Ramirez lunged. Reed dodged, stumbling across the rocky ground as Ramirez swung with unnatural force, fingers bent at impossible angles. Reed had no weapons now, only the cliff behind him and the forest in front. He ran, he sprinted for the tree line, branches clawing his arms, lungs burning. Behind him he heard footsteps, but not Ramirez's alone. Dozens, dragging, tapping, mimicking human rhythm but failing, blending into a chorus of distorted motions. The forest twisted as he ran, the paths shifting like a maze changing shape. Reed tripped on something soft, something that shouldn't have been there. He looked down and nearly screamed. It was a police uniform, empty but warm, fresh, and the name tag, Miller. Before he could move, something grabbed his ankle. A hand, thin, pale, fingers too long, protruding from under the leaves. Reed kicked wildly, tearing free, running blindly deeper into the trees. His flashlight beam flickered across trunks carved with handprints. Hundreds of them, overlapping like a terrible history written by victims who never left. He followed the sound of crashing waves, anything to stay oriented, until he burst into a clearing and froze. It was the old watchtower, 30 feet tall, rotting wood, windows broken like dark eyes staring out at the island. Every officer who died here had reported seeing someone standing in that tower on their final night. Now Reed saw it too. A figure stood in the top window, backlit by the moon. Tall, still, watching. Reed's breath caught. "Ethan?" he whispered without meaning to. The figure moved, slowly turning its head toward him. Reed backed away, heart hammering. The forest behind him rustled, voices whispering, branches snapping. He had nowhere else to run. No boat, no backup, no escape. The tower door creaked open on its own. Not pushed, not pulled, just opened, like it was breathing. Reed stepped inside. The air changed immediately. The temperature plunged. Every sound outside, waves, wind, footsteps, cut off, replaced by a heavy silence. The wooden floor was covered in drag marks, long and deep, like something had been pulled up the stairs repeatedly. Reed climbed slowly, each step groaning beneath him. Halfway up, he felt the tower sway, not from the wind, but from something shifting inside the walls. He kept going, breath trembling. At the top, he found Ethan, or what was left of him. The body was slumped in the corner, uniform torn, eyes wide open and lifeless. But the horror wasn't the corpse, it was the shadow behind it. A second outline hovered over Ethan's body, tall and thin, its shape rippling like cloth under water. When Reed stepped closer, the shadow turned. It didn't have a face, but it borrowed one. Ethan's face flickered across its surface like a projection. Then Miller's, then Brooks's, then Reed's. The shadow smiled using his own mouth. "Now," it whispered in his voice, "you understand." Reed stumbled back as the tower shook violently. The shadow stretched toward him, arms elongating like serpents, wrapping around the beams. The entire structure groaned. The island wasn't just killing them, it was collecting them, learning them, becoming them. Reed turned to flee, but the tower door slammed shut. The wood behind him bulged as if something immense pressed against it. The shadow rose fully, dozens of faces swimming across its form. "You don't get to leave," it whispered. The tower collapsed. The forest fell silent. The collapse should have killed him. The entire upper half of the tower came down in a roar of cracking beams and splintered wood, dust exploding like smoke as everything hit the ground. But when Reed opened his eyes, he wasn't under the debris. He was lying on bare dirt, staring up at a gray sky that pulsed like a heartbeat. Around him, the ruins of the watchtower were scattered in a perfect circle as if something had moved them aside. His ribs ached, his head throbbed, but nothing was broken. He pushed himself up slowly, coughing, blinking through the settling dust. And then he saw the footprints around him. Not one set, not two, hundreds, all circling the spot where he lay. Some looked human, some didn't. Some had toes pointing the wrong way. Some were deep, pressed so hard into the earth that the ground cracked. He was surrounded. Not just now. The footprints layered on top of each other like a message. "We've been watching you." Reed staggered to his feet, swaying, trying to regain focus, but the forest around him felt wrong, like it had moved while he was unconscious. The trees stood too close, forming crooked walls that angled inwards as though pushing him toward a single path. The ground beneath his boots felt soft, spongy, like walking on flesh. He forced himself forward anyway, every instinct screaming to run. Somewhere far off, the island groaned again, that low, ocean-deep sound that made the air vibrate. He followed the only opening in the trees, breath ragged. With each step, whispers slithered around him, calling his name in tones he recognized. Ethan's voice, Brooks's voice, even his own. Soft, coaxing, as though the island itself was breathing through their memories. "Reed, come back. Stay." He clenched his teeth, pushing through, refusing to respond. Responding felt like a trap. The path twisted until he reached a clearing he recognized, barely. The old boat dock, or what used to be a dock. Now the shoreline had changed colors, turning a sickly bluish black, as if the water here was rotting. The dock was submerged completely, only the tops of the wooden posts poking above the rising tide like broken teeth. The sea did not move like normal ocean water. It pulsed inward and outward, not with tide, but with breathing, like a chest slowly expanding and contracting. Reed stepped back from the edge. A shape moved beneath the dark water, enormous and slow, coiling beneath the surface like a serpent made of shadows. He felt bile rise in his throat. That thing beneath the island, that mass, wasn't just alive. It was sentient. And hungry, a low voice rose behind him. "Reed!" He spun around. Ramirez stood there, or something wearing Ramirez's body. His uniform hung wrong, stretched in places, loose in others, like someone had worn his skin and hadn't put it on right. His head twitched, jerking left and right in a rhythm that didn't match breathing. His eyes were black. Not dark brown, black, completely, endlessly black. Reed backed away, raising a piece of splintered wood like a weapon. Ramirez, no, the thing inside him, tilted its head slowly, observing Reed with eerie fascination. "Why run?" it asked, voice soft but layered, like multiple people speaking through him. "This place has waited for you." Reed didn't answer. He just moved. Fast. He bolted toward the trees, but the ground in front of him rose, literally rose, forming a mound that pulsed once before something tore out of it. A pale arm. Then another. Then a face, one he almost recognized. Officer Miller, eyes glazed, jaw slack, body broken, controlled like a puppet rising from the earth. Reed stumbled backward, nearly tripping as Miller's corpse dragged itself upright, head tilting. "It learns us," the corpse whispered. "It needs us." Reed's breath shattered in his chest. He turned and ran the other way, but the forest closed behind him like a moving wall, trees bending inward. There was no escape. Only guidance. The island was hurting him. Panting, he burst into another clearing, the abandoned graveyard. Dozens of crude wooden markers leaned across the uneven ground, each etched with initials. Some markers were freshly carved, names belonging to the 22 officers who died that year. But the disturbing part wasn't the graves, it was the bodies standing between them. Figures in police uniforms, shoulders slumped, necks twisted, eyes empty, silent, waiting. Each face was pulled and stretched like wax warmed by fire. They watched him with the stillness of statues and the intention of predators. The moment Reed stepped backward, they moved in unison, one step forward. All at once, their boots hit the ground with the same rhythm. Drag. Tap! Drag! Tap! The sound Ethan reported before he died. Reed turned only to freeze. Standing at the edge of the clearing was Ethan Marrow himself. Or at least his face. The thing wearing him tilted its head, the familiar features bending into impossible geometry. "You came," it whispered. Its voice was Ethan's, but wrong, too smooth, too practiced. Then the smile came, the one too wide, too human, too rehearsed. "You should have stayed away." Reed backed off, shaking. "Why us?" he shouted. "Why police? What do you want?" The creature blinked with a crackling motion, the eyelids jerking independently. "Because you come alone," it answered. "Because no one follows." Its voice deepened. "Because the island needs new shapes." The ground beneath Reed's feet vibrated. The graves trembled. One by one, the wooden markers toppled. Something underground pressed upward in several places at once, stretching the soil like a blanket over writhing bodies. Reed dropped the wood shard and ran. He had no plan, no direction, only the instinct that staying meant death. The forest didn't let him go easily, branches clawing at him, the ground shifting, voices calling from every direction. But somehow, as if by mistake, he found the path toward the cliffs again. The sea's monstrous shadow writhed below, but Reed didn't stop. He ran along the cliff edge toward the lighthouse in the distance, the only building he hadn't seen yet. Maybe shelter. Maybe signal. Maybe salvation. Behind him, the island shrieked. Not a creature. Not the sea. The island. A single deafening cry that split the air, twisting the sky into swirling clouds. The wind finally moved, howling across the cliffs. Reed reached the lighthouse door and slammed his shoulder against it, once, twice, until it burst open. He stumbled inside, gasping, slamming the door behind him. For the first time since arriving on Deadwater Point, the island fell silent. Reed collapsed against the wall, trembling, heart racing. He was alive, for now. But as his breathing slowed, he heard something above him. Soft, slow footsteps descending the lighthouse stairs. Someone was already inside. The footsteps above were slow, deliberate, measured, each one separated by a long pause, as if whoever was descending needed to remember how walking worked. Reed pressed himself against the lighthouse wall, gripping the shattered wood plank he'd carried from the tower, knuckles white, breath held tight in his throat. Dust drifted from the stairwell with every step the unseen figure took, floating through the dim shaft of gray light like falling ash. The silence between steps was worse than the sound itself. It was as if the island was waiting with him, listening through the walls. Reed forced himself to breathe quietly, each inhale thin and shallow. He had nowhere left to run. No forest path, no shoreline, no teammates, just the lighthouse and whatever the island had sent down those stairs. The footsteps stopped. Right at the landing, Reed lifted the plank slightly. A shape moved at the top, a shadow stretching long across the curved wall, bending unnaturally at the corners like a reflection in broken glass. Slowly, too slowly, the figure leaned forward until its head appeared over the railing. Reed's breath caught in his throat. It was Ethan's face again, but not the decayed version from before. This time the features were clearer, smoother, nearly human. The eyes blinked almost in unison. The mouth formed a faint, practiced smile. The creature had improved, learned, adapted. It began its descent, hand sliding across the rusted railing, fingers grasping it with perfect human precision. When it reached the bottom step, Reed saw the skin around its wrists ripple, shifting like liquid over bone. It wasn't wearing Ethan's face. It was growing it. Reed backed deeper into the lighthouse, heartbeat thundering. The creature tilted its head with unsettling curiosity. "You run," it whispered in Ethan's exact voice. "We follow." Its knees bent wrong as it stepped into the light, every movement slightly delayed, as if someone puppeteered each limb seconds apart. Reed swung the plank. The creature didn't dodge, it let the blow land. The wood cracked across its head, splitting skin. For a moment, Reed felt hope. But the cut didn't bleed. It widened, spread, and beneath the torn flesh wasn't muscle. It was more eyes. Dozens of them. Too small. Too black. Too human. The creature tilted its face, the new eyes blinking out of rhythm, studying him from inside its own head. "We grow," it whispered. "When you hurt us, we grow." Reed ran up the spiral stairs. His boots clanged against the metal steps, echoing upward through the tower. The creature followed, but not by climbing. Its body elongated upward, stretching like shadow, hands gripping the railing 3 meters above where they should have been. The lighthouse shook with its ascent. Reed burst into the lantern room at the top, chest heaving. The circular space was open, glass panes broken long ago, wind cutting through violently now that the storm had fully awakened. The sea below boiled as the massive shadow beneath it shifted again, responding to the chaos above. Reed backed into the shattered window frame, the storm wind pulling at him, threatening to drag him into the dark water far below. The creature rose through the stairway opening, its body folding and unfolding like fabric hung in water. It stepped inside, every limb rearranging as it took human shape again. Ethan's face settled over its skull like a dripping curtain. "You belong," it said. "We only take who won't be found." Reed shook his head violently. "Why police?" he shouted over the storm. "Why us? Why only us?" The creature blinked slowly, the skin of its neck rippling. "Because you are sent alone," it answered. "Because the island is fed by those who come to observe death. You come to record, to investigate, to explain." Its mouth widened into a raw, tearing smile. "And the island learns through those who try to understand it." Reed stumbled backward until his back hit the cold metal of the lighthouse frame. The storm roared. The waves below surged upward unnaturally, reaching for the rocks like giant hands. The creature advanced, arms elongating, shoulders cracking as it stretched wider than a human should. "Accept your part," it whispered. "Become what you came to find." Reed grabbed the broken lantern housing beside him, a metal frame still jagged with rust, and swung it into the creature's face. This time the blow caused it to stagger. A ripple shot through its entire form, distorting Ethan's features into an array of other faces. Brooks, Ramirez, Miller, officers long dead. They overlapped like flickering frames in a corrupted video. "Stop!" the creature hissed in all their voices at once. Reed didn't stop. He lunged, ramming the creature with all his weight. They crashed together into the broken window frame, momentum carrying them out into the storm. Reed clung to the creature's shoulders, wind tearing at his body as they fell toward the churning sea. The thing shrieked, not in fear but in fury, its body twisting violently midair. And then a massive black coil erupted from below, rising to meet them. It wasn't a tentacle. It wasn't a creature. It was the island's true body, a column of shifting flesh, eyes, hands, mouths, bones, all fused into one writhing mass. It opened like a maw as they fell toward it. The creature Reed grappled with reached downward as if returning home. Reed had seconds. He shoved himself away, kicking off the creature with all the strength he had left. The massive coil swallowed the mimic whole, dragging it below with a wet, thunderous sound. But Reed's fall angled just enough for him to miss the living mouth beneath. The sea hit him like concrete. His consciousness flickered. He surfaced once, gasping, twice choking. Then a current pulled him sideways, not down, a miracle he couldn't understand. He drifted away from the island, vision blurring. The lighthouse shrinking behind him, the storm swallowing everything. Hours later, a rescue crew from the mainland found him washed onto a distant shore, half-conscious. Hypothermic, babbling nonsense about the island. He survived. Against every natural law he survived, but in the hospital, when they questioned him, Reed said something that made the chief turn pale. "It didn't try to kill me," he whispered. "It let me go." "Why?" the chief asked. Reed stared at the wall, eyes unfocused. "Because it wanted me to bring someone back." His reflection in the window blinked a second after he did.